for our final session of the day, I'm super excited to bring Zeena Koda, who's the Senior Director of Digital Brand Management at North Face, to the stage. Zeena is going to be chatting with Chung, who's the founder and chairman of Cashmere, an award-winning lifestyle marketing agency that we just became formally better than friends with. So I'm super excited that both of you made time to have a chat today about the metaverse and what it means. And I know we're also super there on time and everyone's got things to do. So I'm going to just immediately turn this over to you guys and let you get after it.
Great. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
And Zeena, great to see you.
You too, Ted.
So, in kind of watching the discussions that have been happening in the, versed in the metaverse section, I think that there were, things you and I have discussed over the past week that would be great to get your perspective on, right? In your work in fashion and culture and at North Face, and maybe drill in a little bit more there, right? Because I think a lot of ground has been covered. So maybe we just start with, this notion that you and I talked about that, fashion is an interesting space that is quickly gravitated towards, NFTs and the metaverse, because as you and I discussed, it's very much based on the premise of, scarcity, right? Like Rolex purposefully makes announcements, as they did recently, that they're not going to be able to make as many watches as usual, which, this notion of scarcity and unavailability increases their value proposition. And we've seen this in the world of fashion. So maybe just to get your, first perspective on the lay of the land of like, what have you seen brands in fashion do? What have they done so far, whether it's NFT related, metaverse related, and who's sort of done it right? Has anyone done it wrong?
There's a lot of levels to this. So I love that we're unpacking all the different nuances. In general, we're coming out of a really crazy time where, many different brands have different speeds of working. There's different parameters that you need to kind of walk through in order to execute anything. I think that one of the really interesting things is each retail brand and luxury brand and all of these brands that are starting to walk into the space have different aims, motivations, different ways of working that have to be considered in these types of spaces. And, one of the questions, like when I'm talking through the team and just kind of thinking through like, what is the right direction for us to go in the space, especially because we are an outdoor company at its heart and want people to get outside and want to bring and accelerate utilities that are going to allow us to kind of converge those needs. Like Nick was talking about, finding things that are just not novelty, finding things that are actually going to be of a utility to what our brand ethos and what our brand stands for. There are a lot of questions that you have to ask and think through a lot of the implications and, kind of issues that may come up with some of this new technology. We're all learning as we go, right? When I think to my background coming from the entertainment and music industry, we were in this game way, way ahead of time. And even then we were probably late to the game in terms of the tech, in the tech space. Thinking of Fortnite and some of the technologies that really helped to make it more of a viable option, creating, again, that scarcity, exclusivity, inspires me in the work that I'm doing now at the North Face to also think, well, how can we make and scale and leverage that ethos to make it brand right? And I think that we're not the only brand kind of thinking through some of those challenges, because there are a lot of just implications and pieces. Like I know one thing that we talked about was the environmental piece, right? When you're unpacking kind of, the thought of blockchain and the energy implications there, as a company that stands behind sustainability, is working towards an eventual net zero and really trying to get all of those things in place. It's a problem. It's something you actually have to think through, because it could be a PR crisis immediately. And also it's just not what we're trying to do. So in kind of the things that I'm considering in the future, really have to also think through, how are we working through offsets? How are we thinking through some of those issues? Is it the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? Are there other alternatives, right? It's really taking all those things in consideration and not at least from our point of view as an established brand, as something that really, we have to think through a lot of those different pieces. It's important to consider those things. So as you and I had discussed, luxury is on top of it ahead of the game right immediately. And I think it is that thought of scarcity and kind of just that driver, that fuel that has gassed the luxury industry for some time, that really helps to make them quick to the table and bring them there very immediately. But other companies definitely have to start dipping a toe. So you've seen some of the stuff that we did, obviously, around the Gucci collaboration, I believe it was last year, to kind of like build through Niantic's utility with Pokemon Go and pieces like that I think companies that align with our ethos, like actually let's get outside, let's do something that's going to bring people in real life. And we're seeing that actually kind of trickle down in the e-commerce space as well. In other places, there's just so much opportunity there to connect those different bridges. And those are things that we, from a starting point, and just every company in general is probably thinking through, how do we both make this a buzzworthy, interesting moment, but also how do we then connect it to the possibility to then bring in revenue in a legitimate way that's also not going to be thirsty or kind of like off-brand for you?
Yeah, no, that's really really key, right? We always discuss, in detail, whether it's with campaigns or with clients at Cashmere, and certainly with what you're doing at North Face. It's very clear that the authenticity component, right, of whatever you're doing, and while many are just getting their feet wet and saying, how do I get into the blockchain metaverse space with my brand, it seems that as you always do, you've been very thoughtful and mindful about, like, we'll do it, but it has to be done in ways that are very authentic to the brand's core values, right? Totally. And I'm curious, like, are there particular avenues in? I mean, sustainability is something you mentioned was important. Are there any other points of observation that where you're like, well, maybe this is one way North Face could traverse the metaverse?
I think in general, it's kind of looking at, and it's not just for the North Face in general, like from an industry perspective, it's looking at, again, how deep your digital capabilities go and how those seams connect together, because it is literally evolving in front of our eyes and connecting those dots. And one area that really excites me and the potential for the future is, I don't want to say too much, but a project.
Give us a little peek.
Just a little peek. A project that I've been looking into as well, that we, from a VF perspective, they've been really investing in, just different digital areas, as like Nick has kind of highlighted before. They're just really interesting, again, like e-commerce ways of work above and beyond just what you can do within established metaverses, right? So, obviously we know the Roblox of the world. Again, like, I would consider Fortnite a pretty strong one because it has been around and culturally relevant and changing the game from an entertainment and culture perspective for some time. But I think that there's a lot of subversive ways that you can actually build even within those pieces. And there's also, like, one other thing that just comes to mind actually in a question that you asked is, there's a moral compass aspect of this too, that kind of is also like aligned with the sustainability piece. When we're looking at partners to work with, obviously we know where consumers are, right? Like we understand these spaces in which they're already existing and we could potentially be a partner in, but it is the question too of like guns and other aspects of things, like we were thinking, especially in the gaming space, like it narrows the scope of where you can be authentically and with the right heart, if that makes sense. And in some ways it could feel limiting, but I actually think it's more empowering because it makes it crystal clear that there are areas that really are exciting to us and feel that they morally and, values wise align with what we're doing. And I think that is super interesting to me when I'm thinking of especially gaming and other places that the metaverse kind of pops up. I think it's that. And really the e-commerce space, there's a lot of just like interesting exclusivity and loyalty plays that you can make. I work with my teammates on kind of just brainstorming and ideating those ideas. And I do see, a place for that to live in our future. And it'll be interesting, especially with this Facebook deal, to kind of see how that manifests itself, especially from a paid and e-commerce point of view. I think that that's going to be a key unlock, but also maybe like there's a lot of TBD there as to how that would exactly, how that would change the marketplace, especially for where they are right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you bring up Fortnite. I recall when the Travis Scott performance happened, and I was like, waiting patiently and excitedly for the show to start. And after going through that, I just walked away being like, oh, this is completely real now. Like, what had always been in I know you have an entertainment background and I have an entertainment background, what had always been pitched as like the novelty of a virtual or a metaverse performance. I mean, if there was anything where it just sunk in, it was that moment, right? Which is interesting because I think it took a culture icon and the culture to like kind of synthesize it. And I'd be curious to hear your opinion on like, where does culture, where does diversity, where does entertainment fit into this matrix of how we're going to navigate our metaverse strategies?
Oh, I mean, entertainment has the greatest license to be as creative as possible, right? That's the beauty and the daunting task of when you work in the entertainment industry, right? You can really take it any way possible. And I would agree. I mean, I remember like my time, and it wasn't that long ago, we would, be pitching like these huge moments. And there was an insane thirst and exclusivity to that, even for like top tier artists, right? So like when you're thinking about those universes, it's really built a lot of stock up on that exclusivity. And I think that it only gets deeper, right? And there's a really exciting opportunity. I'm really lit up by companies like Niantic that are creating this interesting scalable kind of technology for brands to dive into and just other partners to dive into, which allows people to take that, again, in real life and virtual world piece and connect them together. And like you see that through all the incredible work they've done over the years in Pokemon Go, because I do think that it opens up an interesting door for entertainment, music, sports is another huge area that I think could really benefit from kind of converging some of these things. And again, like all areas that are pretty innovative in their own right, because they have to be, right? Like it's completely evolving and you're reaching fans where they exist. But I think there could be some really interesting opportunities, especially at festivals, and finding ways for us to get back in real life, but also create a little bit of that interactivity that was dying out a bit before the pandemic, right? Like you go to a festival, there's kind of a cool experience, you take a photo, right? You post it online. And that was kind of like, maybe it's very personal to me because I've done that myself. That was kind of like your experience at a festival. Then you see the music and then it's over, right? I mean, it's been a few years since the Tupac, the Tupac hologram, right? We haven't really seen a ton of like interesting, innovative work there. So I do think as we continue on and real life starts to open up again, this notion of the metaverse being more mainstream and these capabilities to actually bring AR and other different places to the real world will help to really connect in an interesting way. And I think like, again, bringing those virtual experiences to real life experiences will help to make it even richer. And honestly, they kind of bridge, it's getting creepier, right? It's getting to the robotic universe where we're bridging that gap between both of those worlds in a way that feels less sci-fi, right? It actually feels utilitarian and useful. And I'll be stoked to see. I think the festivals are a really good place, an interesting place to start that kind of work, and just offer premiums through that.
Yeah, I mean, you sparked this thought when you said that the North Face is about getting outside and exploring, and from a brand value standpoint. And you started talking about festivals. I was thinking about it in my head. I just went to a music performance last week for the first time, and it was interesting. There was an artist on stage but this is the first time that I saw that the audience was looking at each other and talking and congregating more than they were paying attention to the artist, right? There was this need to, I guess, this pent up need to start, just to interacting with people IRL. And that was really interesting to see. I was very much in the back on the grass by myself, being safe, but like watching the audience was interesting. But it also bodes to like the fact that, like, as challenging as it is to get to some of these destinations, to explore the outdoors, I could see how like then the metaverse would bridge that gap for many people right now, right? Which could be interesting for how you guys are looking at it at the North Face.
When you think about like hiking on a trail, for instance, we're both in LA now. So you're hiking on, a little bit more remote than Runyon, right? But somewhere like in the Malibu Hills. And you think about it, there's so many opportunities that are unlocked through these capabilities that allow you to create virtual experiences that don't require a lot of setup and also environmentally friendly, right? Keeping in that sustainability and conscious area, because we have done work over the years. And I see a question here about, marketing dollars. It's like, we're always thinking about our values. Our values really drive a lot of what we do from the marketing end, right? So we're not going to do something that's going to compromise that, which does make it difficult for an area like this where we have to really kind of think through those checks and balances a bit more. But again, it narrows your focus and makes it sharper so that you're really clear on what you're trying to get out of it. And also there's a lot of, test and learn. So say you're on the trail, right? We're walking down the trail and we were able to unlock different experiences through that AR technology or, through a metaverse that we're building or building it into something else like a PokeGo, there's just so many cool things that can be unlocked, and you can create an actual game for people in real life through those opportunities. Which again is feeling way more comfortable in the marketplace in a way that, again, might have felt maybe novelty or a little bit out of the box before, or just like, where is this applicable back to the brand, right? And some brands are just way more innovative than others, like we know that. But there is really this interesting like real life utility in both above and beyond just even that e-commerce space, like just creating experiences in real life that come to life through real life. And that's definitely the uniqueness of this time. Like it is truly meta when you think about the definition of it. Like you're really just creating these things that are truly in the space that they live.
No, that's super dope. I think it'd be good to get your thoughts on, you just said the word, and I know it's come up a few times during these talks, but what is your perspective on what it means for the name announcement with Facebook? What is that signaling? I know that there's been critics of it and memes online, but I'm just saying in general from an industry perspective, right? What is that signaling for us?
Oh, Facebook is an interesting place for me on a personal level and, professional level. Like obviously there are so many different tentacles that it reaches out to, because it's above and beyond just Facebook, right? Or Meta. At this point, I mean, literally I signed on to Instagram today and I was like, wow, the branding is done. It's there. Like there was no incubation period. And I mean, you almost got to respect that about Facebook, how quickly they go in, they figure it out and they go in, but it does make you question why other things can't happen, right? As quickly. So there is Facebook. I don't envy the position that they're in, right? It is not an easy one. And when you're older, but still big and what literally the biggest, you kind of think to yourself, like, what is next, right? So it would be odd if they didn't go through this other than, doing acquisitions and all these other things that I've been doing for years and kind of building a bit of a monopoly over that space. Like, I'm not shocked by this at all, but reading some of the criticisms, it does crack me up because it really does go back to a bit of like the controversy that Zuckerberg was under in the first place, right? Kind of stealing these other ideas that people have really built and crowdsourced and invested in for some time, which again, when you get the check, it's pretty easy to do that, right? But I am curious if your grandmother, who's on Facebook, right, will understand how that exactly applies to her generation. And it will be an interesting evolution to see, will they be able to actually make it more common language and bring it to a completely different subset of people who are literally mind blown. Like, are they really the catalyst to that change and breaking that innovative, piece with audiences that may not be as hip as us to some of these concepts? TBD, right? And I
Yeah.
think they've tried a lot of different utilities over the last years that have like really started kind of ramping up to this, like the gaming piece. You think about even like the selling marketplace, like that is another piece that's very interesting and could have like a meta application. They've been in, Facebook Watch and in video for a minute. So
Even shopping on IG, you know how many things
yeah.
I've bought on IG recently? Like in the past 2 years, it's crazy, right? Like I would never assume that that would be a place I'd be able to so fluidly just look at something and be like, that interests me, and just purchase it quickly.
S-commerce has been bubbling for years, but I mean, we're all victim to it, right? And if anything, the pandemic showed us like, show me something fun, good, and DIY, and we're ready to buy it, right? And if you give me one click, it's a wrap, right? You've got my $50, and you'll be getting probably like 20 more of my $50 purchases. So I don't take for granted the fact that everything they do is a test and learn. And I do think that they've been gathering this intel and information for some time. I mean, we're giving it to them literally. And it will be interesting to see how this move culturally shifts the way that people interact again from all different generations. And I really am super curious to see if we look back in 2 years, will it stick, right? Because they've also, and it's not just them, they're, every social network that has evolved has thrown something to the universe that doesn't stick, right? That just doesn't work out for them. But again, test and learn. You get intel, you figure out how to make it better. And it's an 24 hours, 365 days a year job that they're using machine learning on. And like, when we think of, again, those sci-fi movies that we may have watched as kids, we're entering that time period, right? We're really entering a time period where machine learning and bringing us to a different universe, aka this metaverse, right, is becoming more of a reality that interseams into our everyday lives. So curious, we'll have to see how it all pans out, right?
Yeah, and I see a question that came up that I think is interesting, since it sounds like we've been talking about purchasing things on Facebook's robust platforms. But at the North Face or at other companies, what have you seen as far as the trends of organizational structure or interaction between marketing and e-commerce, right? Like, how are those two divisions now becoming one? Are they getting closer, or what is the connective tissue now?
Definitely getting closer. And I think it's a consideration across both sides, right? Whereas maybe it was a bit of a church and state in the past. And I'm very privy to it because I also oversee social, where it's like, you see everything through social. You see customer service reactions, you see obviously brand marketing reactions, you see just overall customer sentiment for the brand. I think that it becomes more important than ever for heads of those different functions to really think through both of the implications for both sides. Whereas like traditionally a lot of these companies are shaped like, here's the internet team, right? Like, and here's kind of the brand marketing team. And there's just all of these different divisions that are kind of remnants of the past, where companies have to be much more nimble and real time with how they're reshaping these teams. Even for us, it's reshaped over the last 2 years that I've been here. And if we're doing it right, we'll continue to evolve and converge some of these different, kind of thought patterns and calendars and just ways of working together. Again, like I'm constantly thinking through S-commerce and how we can be 1 click, 2 clicks, right? Again, from a traditional brand marketing point of view, may not necessarily need to be an objective, but I'm a consumer and you're a consumer, and we're all thinking through what is consumer behavior, what is consumer, point of view, like what is the best way for us to penetrate the market through our consumers and also connect with them in a real, authentic way. And I think that really using that as kind of a driver across all of these different functions helps us to better converge those needs together, and also think through problems and troubleshoot and figure out different ways that we could be leveraging our best content and just doing this better. I mean, we're all learning as we go because this is a whole new universe, right? Like you don't go to college, you go to college to study maybe the ethical background or just kind of the structural background of how marketing works and your funnels, which on a personal level, I'm not the biggest funnel fan, but I just think the funnel doesn't exist in the same way today. But I think that challenging those notions and consistently learning and consistently sharing information and pushing the boundaries is the best way for teams to kind of figure out what is the structure that works for you, what are remnants of the past, and what are ways that we can evolve that are going to help us to think of the marketplace 5 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, that funnel or timeline, which, could traditionally be seen as product manufacturing, then marketing, and then, and product manufacturing, sales, marketing, and then social, and then media, whatever it might be. It's almost like with even clients we've seen for the past 5 years, they've totally reorganized their structures where it's that team leaders on each of these have to be involved from the very beginning, right? Because they have to have line of sight into each other's core functions in order to really take advantage of that one-click moment you're talking about, right? Otherwise, you're totally dysfunctional.
Totally. And I think the interesting thing about digital is it's both a year from now, and it's today, and it's 1 hour from now, and it's this very moment, right? It is the area that literally hits every piece of the timeline, and each piece of the timeline has its value. And being able to think today and tomorrow is not always the easiest, right? Especially in projecting like how you allocate resources and how you kind of handle the fires that may be going on today, or the bullets that need to be like dispersed to take care of those problems. So like it is an ever evolving place where we're again all learning in real time how to best approach, and every workplace is just structured so differently, and again has a different investment in technology and advancement in the digital space, whether or not it's more resources allocated towards e-commerce or it's more towards maybe brand digital or just whatever. Everybody is at a different stage of this game and evolution, and yeah, I mean, the world's getting more digital. Everything, marketing is digital at this point, with out of home being like a very small portion of it. And who knows, like maybe we'll get back into real life in the real swing in a year and be like super blazing on it. But then, leveraging the metaverse to help us bring some of those aspects, like we were discussing before, into real life. I think like it's an exciting time where there's just so much opportunity, and it's really taking that opportunity daily to figure out how you can be doing it better, learning from others, sharing information, and really connecting with teams to see how you can revolutionize and innovate the way that each of them are working.
I had a conversation yesterday with a friend and was mentioning that we were going to do this call together, this fireside chat together. And, the subject came up of like, okay, could we have gotten here without all the things that have happened to us over the past few years, but most importantly, the leaping over the obstacle of and fast forwarding our connectivity globally, right? And speaking more frequently and having the opportunity to do the virtual conferences and communications with people everywhere, right? And how much of that feeds into the sort of global community pushing this acceleration of the development of everything from blockchain, NFT, metaverse, et cetera. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that, right? Like, what does this mean for us as like a global community?
Oh, I mean, it made the world smaller, right? It's both smaller and bigger all in one. I mean, we had to be hyper connected in ways that we never had to before. I mean, hyper connected to the person who lives down the street and then the person who lives in Japan, right? It really has, to your point, kind of brought us into one world in a way that didn't necessarily feel as cohesive before. I actually have this conversation with our APAC partners pretty often and just ask them to go through their plans with me always, because I just love seeing the innovation and kind of differences of like Tmall and all these other like universes that they're living in that has scalable, again, technology and other, just other pieces for us as a global team. Obviously, knowing that that utility is crushing it for them, but it may not be as popular, for instance, in the North America region or even the EMEA region, or just not even available, right? Watching that globalization and the way that they work really also helps to found, hey, they're like ahead of a lot of the technologies that even we might be utilizing, and helps to found also like where my 3-5 year plan goes, right? And what it looks like, and kind of like tapping into some of those resources and thinking through like, okay, well, we can't scale out on some of the things, and who knows, Meta may take us somewhere else, right? Maybe we're going to tap into more of that APEC technology than we think in the future. But it is this, a spark that makes me think about the fact that like a lot of these countries are just doing it amazingly and have really kind of like stepped to the plate over the pandemic and really helped to advance a lot of these technologies. And I think about that with NFTs all the time, because NFTs aren't new, right? They're not a new thing, but we're seeing them again globally, like, and culturally popular because we have been advanced in this way. And we have been kind of forced to take a different look at, are there other revenue streams? Are there other ways that people could actually take a little bit more ownership over their art, or take a little bit, just take ownership over anything that could be proprietary to them in a completely different way? And I question too, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it, Ted. Like, would NFTs have rose to the forefront as quickly if we didn't have something like the pandemic happen, where we have to kind of access those touch points and kind of think about different revenue streams and resources? So no,
yeah, I mean,
revolutionized, right?
Absolutely, I'm speaking to that, right? And it's whether it was the pandemic, whether it was the widespread use of Zoom, whatever it was, I think our global network as individuals certainly increased over the past 2-3 years, right? For many reasons, and what were, to your point, where NFTs aren't a new thing, but what were micro communities that maybe in Japan, in China, in the US, in a country in Africa, even though there were micro communities that were behind the notion and the proposition of NFTs, it took that global community then to speak more often and gain critical mass as one consolidated group and tribe to say, like, let's push this to the forefront, right? And I think that's the power of, and what's interesting to me about the metaverse is that, like, in many ways, this is also a tributary effect of that, which is metaverse are going to be places where, and spaces that are valuable because they're now, locations where people from around the world who normally wouldn't be able to have something to own together can own something in a place with people that have a similar mind share or a similar purpose or similar values. And that's the part that as sort of culture innovators like us, and what we talk about all the time, that I find really interesting, right? So it's not just communities because you like one genre of music. It's communities that, like, I like this kind of music, but I like it at this tempo, and I like it said in this language, and I like that music when I'm, eating this kind of food. It gets very particular, and those are small communities in one country, but when you aggregate, around the world, there's so many more of a pool of individuals to pull together under, someone who shares a lot of similar values as you, that gets very specific. And I think that'll be interesting to see how it manifests.
That specificity is so real. I mean, it's the reason why a lot of people have kind of like been drawn to TikTok when you think about it too, because you think there's nobody in the world like me. And then you see through video, through an earnest and honest platform, that there's somebody in the middle of Thailand who's exactly like me and loves this one super weird thing that we both are like obsessed with, right? And that connection, to your point, that kind of flattened level of communication that we've been seeing kind of growing and growing and growing over the last probably 20 years has been accelerated when people are yearning for that kind of connection, to your point. Especially over time of the pandemic, where like we got nothing but time, let's figure out how to make it happen together, right? And that's why I'm really excited by utilities like Discord and places where you can build community. It's like your modern Reddit meets chat room meets, video capabilities platform and audio capabilities platform rolled into one. And I think we'll continue to see over the next few years more brands start to understand the value of that. And if they aren't, you're just missing out on such a huge segment of consumers that you could be getting really field information from directly. And it'll be interesting to see how that continues to globalize the way that we work as marketers.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Well, listen, this has been, as always, super fun to chop it up and, discuss a subject matter. And I think it's wonderful that Media.Monks and Jam3 and the group have pulled together, and Joe, a topic that I think we all need to get different perspectives on, from a culture perspective, from a social perspective, and a technical perspective, and how it impacts marketing globally. Because certainly this space, call it metaverse, call it blockchain, is part of a lot of the reckoning and revolution that's happening now. So thank you for joining us today, and thanks everyone for joining our conversation.
Of course. Thank you so much, Ted. Always great to talk to you.